The Galactic Council chamber was a masterpiece of interstellar diplomacy, a vast domed coliseum where representatives from thousands of species gathered to shape the fate of the known universe. Today, it was a battleground. Human Ambassador Elias Carter sat motionless, his face an unreadable mask, as the final vote was tallied. The decision was made. Humanity had lost. A sea of voices filled the chamber, overlapping in a chaotic swirl of smug satisfaction and feigned neutrality. The motion had passed. Humanity's outer colonies, once considered sovereign, were now subject to unrestricted economic development by core-world species. A sanitized way of saying human territories would be exploited, their resources stripped under the guise of galactic cooperation. Carter exhaled slowly. So that's it, then? His voice, though quiet, cut through the noise like a blade. The murmurs ceased as countless alien eyes turned toward him. Counselor Zelver of the Sirith Dominion, a towering insectoid with multifaceted eyes, tilted his head in mock sympathy. Ambassador Carter, you must understand, this is for the good of all. Humanity has always been resistant to true integration. Your colonies will flourish under our guidance. This is an opportunity, not a loss. The words dripped with condescension. Carter knew this wasn't about cooperation. It was about control. Humanity had become too successful, too independent, and the Council, composed mostly of civilizations that had ruled the stars for millennia, had no interest in letting an upstart species upset the status quo. Carter glanced at the digital tally on the central display. 1,432 in favor. 218 against. 50 abstentions. It wasn't even close. The decision had been made long before the vote was cast. Humanity will not accept this, Carter said, his voice unwavering. A ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. Ambassador Threx, a reptilian official from the Verox hegemony, let out a sharp hiss that might have been laughter. With respect, Ambassador, what choice do you have? You abide by the Council's rulings, as all members must. Carter stood. His simple motion sent a wave of tension through the room. We were invited into this council under the promise of fair representation, he said. We played by the rules. We contributed. We innovated. And now, because we refuse to become just another vassal state, you've decided to strip away our sovereignty? No one answered. No one needed to. For a moment, silence reigned. Carter let it linger, then slowly reached for the silver emblem pinned to his chest, the insignia of humanity's seat on the Galactic Council. With deliberate care, he unfastened it and set it on the table in front of him. Gasps rippled through the assembly. It was a simple gesture, but it carried weight. Humanity will not be a part of this any longer, Carter declared. Effective immediately, we withdraw from the Galactic Council. Our treaties, our trade agreements, our alliances, consider them null and void. The room exploded into chaos. Shouts of protest, disbelief, and outrage filled the air. Ambassadors leaned forward, some pleading, others furious. Leaving the council was unheard of. Unthinkable. You cannot simply leave, Zelver sputtered. The council's authority is absolute. Carter gave a small, humorless smile. Then you've made a grave mistake. Without another word, he turned and walked out, the human delegation following silently behind him. The heavy doors closed behind them with a resounding finality. And for the first time in Galactic Council history, the fate of the universe had shifted in a way no one could have predicted. The Galactic Council's official statement came 12 hours after the human delegation walked out. It was filled with the usual diplomatic platitudes, calls for continued cooperation, reassurances that humanity's withdrawal was regrettable but ultimately inconsequential. The message was clear: the Council did not believe Earth would follow through. They were wrong. Within 24 hours, every human-controlled space station outside of Sol went dark. Orbital habitats over trade hubs, once bustling with alien merchants, shut down without warning. Ships belonging to non-human species were denied docking rights, their requests met with silence. At first, the Council assumed it was a bluff. A tantrum thrown by a young species unaccustomed to losing. Surely, humanity would return to the negotiating table once they realized how much they relied on interstellar trade. Then the reports started coming in. On Calrith 7, an agricultural world that relied on human-engineered crops to sustain its fragile ecosystem, supply shipments stopped arriving. Within days, entire districts faced food shortages. Panic spread. The planet's governor reached out to Earth for an explanation. The response was simple: human exports have ceased indefinitely. On Zephyr Prime, a megacity known for its advanced cybernetics industry, shipments of human-designed neural processors suddenly vanished from the market. Verox scientists scrambled to find replacements, but none could match the efficiency of human technology. Production lines stalled. Stock markets plunged overnight. Still, the council hesitated. They had spent centuries dealing with rebellious members, imposing sanctions and economic pressure until compliance was inevitable. But when they attempted the same tactics on Earth, they found nothing to sanction. Humanity was self-sufficient. Council analysts had long assumed that Earth's rapid rise in technology and industry was tied to their participation in galactic trade. But as the days passed and human infrastructure remained fully operational, it became clear that humanity had never truly needed the Council. The rest of the galaxy, however, that was another story. In an emergency session, Council representatives demanded an immediate response. "They are destabilizing the economic balance of the known galaxy," one Sirith diplomat hissed. "They must be brought back into the fold, by force if necessary." It was a sentiment many shared. Within a week, a council task force, a fleet of 50 warships drawn from various species, was assembled. Its stated mission was to restore order in human-controlled sectors. It never made it past the Oort cloud. The first warning came as the fleet approached the outer edge of the Sol system. A single message was broadcast in every known galactic language. "You are entering restricted space. Turn back or you will not be warned again." The fleet's commander, an experienced Threxian admiral, dismissed the threat. After all, humans had only been a spacefaring civilization for a few centuries. What could they possibly do? That arrogance cost them everything. The fleet's communications suddenly went dark. No distress signals. No emergency beacons. Nothing. Over the next 3 days, Council intelligence frantically searched for answers. Probes sent toward Sol found nothing but empty space. The fleet had simply vanished. Then, on the 4th day, an encrypted transmission appeared on every Council terminal, originating from Earth. A single sentence: "Do not come here again." The Council chamber was silent as the message played. For the first time in its long, arrogant history, the Galactic Order realized it had made a mistake. A mistake they might not survive. The Galactic Council did not acknowledge fear. It had ruled the stars for millennia, weaving laws and alliances that bound thousands of species into a fragile but enduring order. Disputes were common. Uprisings happened. But the Council had always been the final authority, its decrees backed by the might of the galaxy's oldest empires. That was before humanity walked away. Before their fleet vanished. Now, for the first time, the Council faced something it did not understand: a war that wasn't a war. After the disappearance of the Council's fleet near the Sol system, diplomatic channels went into overdrive. Every attempt to contact Earth was met with silence. Every probe sent toward human space was destroyed on sight. And while the Council debated its next move, the consequences of humanity's absence continued to ripple across the galaxy. Food shortages on frontier worlds turned into riots. Medical facilities and core systems, once dependent on human nanotech, began to fail. Black markets exploded with demand for anything remotely human-made. Corporations that had thrived on human innovation collapsed overnight. And through it all, Earth remained silent. Some species, particularly the elder races who had long held power, wanted immediate military action. The Sirith Dominion called for full-scale planetary occupation. The Verox hegemony proposed an economic blockade, a last-ditch effort to starve humanity into submission. But no one wanted to lead the charge. Because the question haunted them all: what happened to the fleet? Desperation breeds recklessness. It was only a matter of time before someone tried again. This time, the Council sent a larger fleet, over 100 warships, representing the combined forces of multiple civilizations. A force designed to intimidate, to remind humanity of its place. They would not enter Sol directly. Instead, they would establish a blockade at the system's edge, cutting Earth off from the rest of the galaxy until its leaders came crawling back. That was the plan. The fleet never reached its destination. Halfway through their journey, they encountered an anomaly, a region of space where sensors failed and communications went dark. It was as if the void itself had swallowed them. Then the attacks began. It wasn't a battle. It wasn't even an ambush. It was annihilation. A force the galaxy had never seen before, **** invisible, precise, merciless, ***, struck from the shadows. Ships vanished from formation without a trace. Those that tried to flee found their engines disabled remotely. Those that fought back fired at empty space, their weapons hitting nothing. Survivors managed to send back only one coherent transmission before the fleet was erased from existence. A hollow voice, artificial yet unmistakably human, repeating the same words over and over. "Do not test us." When the transmission played in the council chamber, the reaction was immediate. Some species called for peace talks. Others demanded retribution. But the old certainty, the belief that humanity could be forced into submission, was gone. For the first time, the Galactic Council faced an enemy it could not control. And worse, an enemy that did not seem to care. The war they had expected never came. The demands they assumed would follow never arrived. Humanity had simply disappeared from the galactic stage. And now, the rest of the universe would have to learn how to live without them. The Galactic Council had always believed itself to be the pillar of civilization, a vast, intricate system of trade routes, legal frameworks, and diplomatic agreements that ensured prosperity across thousands of star systems. But that prosperity had a hidden truth. It had been built on humanity. For decades, human advancements had quietly revolutionized every aspect of galactic life. Their high-yield agricultural techniques had turned barren moons into breadbaskets. Their medical breakthroughs had tripled the lifespan of dozens of species. Their computational technologies had become the foundation of interstellar trade, their FTL communication relays ensuring commerce functioned seamlessly across the void. And now, all of it was gone. The first systems to feel the impact were the rim worlds, the colonies and outposts that relied on steady shipments of human-developed goods to sustain their populations. At first, planetary governors assured their people that trade disruptions were only temporary, that the Council would negotiate a swift resolution. But the weeks dragged on, and human shipments did not return. On Sci-Fi Prime, the cybernetics industry collapsed almost overnight. Human-designed neural implants were irreplaceable, their efficiency unmatched by any known alternative. Factories shut down, corporations folded, and thousands were left jobless. On Velshar, an oceanic world that relied on Earth-made filtration systems to keep its atmosphere stable, the water began to turn toxic. Desperate engineers tried to replicate human technology, but their efforts were too little, too late. Riots broke out across multiple sectors. Governments struggled to maintain order as essential supplies dwindled. The galactic credit, the currency standard that had remained stable for centuries, plummeted in value. For the first time in recorded history, the Council faced an unthinkable possibility: total economic collapse. The cracks in the Council's authority became fault lines. Some factions argued for immediate military action, believing that Earth could be forced to resume trade if sufficient pressure was applied. Others, particularly the younger species who had benefited most from humanity's innovations, called for diplomatic reconciliation. And then there were those who saw an opportunity. Corporate warlords, pirate syndicates, and rogue factions began seizing former human markets, attempting to fill the void left behind. Smugglers thrived. Human technology became the most sought-after commodity in the galaxy, traded in black markets at exorbitant prices. The Council tried to control the chaos. It failed. At last, pride gave way to desperation. The council drafted a message, a formal plea for negotiation. It was a humiliating reversal, but there was no other option. The message was sent through every available channel, broadcast across the void. To the leaders of Earth, the Galactic Council requests an immediate diplomatic summit. Our alliance is fractured, but it is not beyond repair. Let us find a way forward, together. There was no response. They sent the message again. And again. For a full week, the council waited. No answer came. Then, finally, a single transmission appeared on their secured diplomatic channels. A human voice. Calm. Measured. Indifferent. You seem to be under the mistaken belief that we are negotiating. We are not. You made your choice. Now live with it. The transmission cut out. Silence followed. The council chamber, once the heart of galactic order, sat frozen in disbelief. And for the first time, the oldest empires in the universe understood what it meant to be powerless. Desperation breeds recklessness. And the Galactic Council, once the unshakable pillar of interstellar civilization, was desperate. Humanity's absence had left a wound that refused to close. The trade networks had collapsed. Starvation had begun on outer colonies. The once mighty economies of the Council's oldest empires teetered on the brink of ruin. Entire industries had folded, unable to replace the technology that once flowed effortlessly from human hands. And still, Earth remained silent. The Council had pleaded. It had bargained. It had sent emissaries, envoys, even defectors. But the response from humanity had always been the same: nothing. So the Council made a decision. A final, irreversible decision. If humanity would not return willingly, they would be forced to. It was meant to be a quiet operation. A strike force, carefully assembled from elite operatives across multiple species, was dispatched towards Sol under the cover of deep space radiation. Their mission was simple: penetrate Earth's defenses, establish a foothold, and seize control of human command structures. They expected resistance. They did not expect total failure. The first sign of trouble came as they passed the outer edge of the system. Their long-range communications dropped instantly. Navigation systems scrambled, their ships reporting coordinates that made no sense. Some of them swore they saw phantom signals, shadowy vessels moving just beyond sensor range. Then, one by one, their ships began disappearing. Not destroyed. Not attacked. Vanishing. Entire crews would blink out of existence mid-transmission. No alarms. No distress calls. Just silence. The remaining operatives panicked. Their best pilots tried to retreat, only to find their engines had been remotely disabled. Someone, was already inside their systems. That's when the message came. A single human voice, speaking in the Council's universal trade language. Calm. Unhurried. Unimpressed. You are trespassing. Your weapons have been neutralized. Your ships are no longer under your control. Your lives, however, are still your own if you choose to leave now. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a threat. It was a choice. Half of the remaining operatives took the offer. Their escape pods were released, guided out of Sol's gravity well with surgical precision. They were sent back to Council space untouched. The others, those too proud, too stubborn to retreat, chose to fight. They were never seen again. When the surviving operatives returned, the Council expected reports of a brutal battle. A struggle. A resistance. Instead, they received a recording. The video played across the Council chamber. It showed a human officer sitting behind a featureless desk. No insignia. No rank. Just a presence. His expression was unreadable. His voice was calm. This is your final warning. We are not your subjects. We are not your resources. And we are not your problem to solve. The officer leaned forward, his gaze locked onto the screen as if he were staring directly into the souls of every Council leader watching. You attempted to force our hand. It didn't work. If you try again, we will stop playing nice. He smiled, not in anger, not in threat, but in amusement. You don't want to find out what that means. The transmission ended. For the first time in history, the council chamber was silent. No rebuttals. No declarations of war. Just silence. The message had been clear. Humanity was done. And now, the rest of the galaxy would have to live with the consequences. The Galactic Council had survived wars, rebellions, and the collapse of empires. It had reshaped civilizations, dictated the rise and fall of economies, and ruled the stars with an authority that had never been questioned. Until now. Until humanity. What had started as a diplomatic dispute had spiraled into a slow, inevitable destruction. The great powers of the Council had believed themselves untouchable, convinced that the galaxy would always function as it had for millennia. But they had built their foundation on arrogance, and humanity had removed the one pillar they never realized they depended on. Trade had not recovered. The core world markets had stagnated, and their colonies had begun to collapse. The younger species, the ones who had once flourished under human innovation, had turned away from the Council, seeking independent alliances with the only power that still had what they needed. Humanity had not just severed its ties with the Council, it had become the new center of gravity, and the universe had begun to shift around it. And then, the final betrayal came. The cracks in the Council had become fractures, and those fractures had deepened into fault lines. Entire factions broke away, some in secret, others in open defiance. The outer systems declared their independence first, no longer willing to abide by the dictates of an authority that had failed to maintain order. Then came the corporations, the trade guilds, the silent financiers who had built their wealth on human advancements. They abandoned the Council in droves, forging their own networks, their own routes, ones that led straight to the Sol system. The remaining Council hardliners, the ones who still clung to the belief that humanity could be forced back into compliance, made one last desperate move. They declared war. It was a war that never truly began. No fleets were sent, no armies deployed. The Council's own generals refused the order, knowing it was suicide. Even the species that had once called for humanity's submission had grown quiet, unwilling to risk the same fate as the fleets that had already vanished. And so, the Council collapsed not in fire, but in silence. The final session was held in a nearly empty chamber. The once crowded seats stood vacant, abandoned by those who had already left to carve out their own futures. The last remnants of the old order sat in stunned disbelief, watching as the very structure they had spent centuries maintaining simply ceased to exist. There was no dramatic declaration, no formal announcement. The Council simply unraveled, its authority fading like the dying light of a collapsing star. And through it all, Earth remained silent. No speeches of victory. No demands. No warnings. Humanity had not needed to lift a finger. They had simply stepped back and let the galaxy destroy itself. In the end, the only record of the Council's last days was a final transmission sent from one of its remaining members, a message broadcast across the empty void of interstellar space. It contained only 3 words. They never came.